And thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about something I'm so passionate about. This is a topic I've heard you all talk about through this conference so far, and hopefully we'll put some ideas and concepts. And I am going to have a chance for you to answer questions in my half an hour, so be prepared, think through it, ask some questions at the end. So, I'm here to talk about the fact that jobs aren't working. Jobs in the construct of how they were built, they were designed for us. The core component of how we thought about HR with jobs at the center is failing us. There's a better way. There's a more agile way. There's a better way to know our workforce, to understand them, to use them, and to develop our people. So what's the context? Well, first of all, the war for talent remains globally. Obviously, we've seen some changes in the markets in tech and very recently in the finance space. But frankly, the war for talent remains. If we look at the unemployment rate at 3.6%, 2% increase in February in the US, we're absolutely seeing the fact that skills and very critical skills are needed by our workforces and by our talent and our business leaders. And we do see, obviously, there's going to be an economic slowdown, but we still see hot skills and critical skills being in demand and understanding our people and actually making decisions as we have to make tough decisions on workforce based on skills rather than jobs as a much more effective way of doing it. And then if we look at the idea of sort of worker agency and a connectivity with our workforce, and frankly, I just want to say it, the debate is over. Hybrid is the future. Any organizations that isn't moving in some sort of hybrid motion is not really connecting to their workforce. 65% of women prefer hybrid work. 75% of millennials and Gen Zs are demanding it. Nearly 10% of job postings are for remote work, and that's 3 times increase. And ultimately, if you look at the right-hand side of this chart, people are not just going back to work. Occupancy rates in the US is not at 50% yet. What does this mean for us? It means that as HR leaders, we need to be able to understand our people when they're not coming to work. It's as simple as that. We need to understand them in ways that we can use them effectively when they're not in our 4 walls. Skills are a way to do that. And then if we really look at how people are demanding what they were demanding from us, there's sort of market trends and social media trends around YOLO and Tang Pang, which means lie flat. You can all Google it now if you want to understand what that means. But ultimately, we're seeing that the workforce is demanding equity, mental health. They're worried about burnout. They need balance. They need learning and development. These are the key things we have to deliver to them. And if we don't, they leave. And ultimately, if you see on the bottom half of this slide, this is highlighting the fact that skills are a way for us to use talent, and not just use talent to engage our workforce, but actually drive more predictability. Keyword, more predictability in hiring, but also using our talent inside the organizations. Business leaders are absolutely seeing this. This is not an HR issue. And this is consistent, as you can see, over the last few years. There's going to be things like the supply chain issues that came out through the pandemic. There's going to be elements for business leaders that are going to talk about impact on the economy and market fluctuations that are going to come up in the next few months as well. But skill shortages, and most importantly, understanding what your skills are for your organization and how it matches to the work and the products and the innovation you're trying to create are going to be number 1 or 2 for your business leaders for the near future, or maybe even long future, which really represents a massive opportunity for us. This isn't an HR-driven exercise. This is a business leader and senior exec perspective. We recently did a survey on workforce risk, focused on the C-suite and board level. And skills shortages was the number 1 issue for all of them. So we can see this is at the top of the house. So why not jobs? Really, what is different now? I know many in this room have been talking about the idea of skills and jobs for some time. This is not necessarily a massively new phenomenon. However, we do think there's a bit of a pivot point here. And the data is telling us that. Jobs cannot keep up. They don't define what we do. They create confusion in our job architecture, in our frameworks, in our talent processes. I mean, ultimately, if you look at this, if only 25% of what I do is the same as someone else in the same job, and then I try and use my talent processes through succession, through performance, through rewards based on job architecture, there's a problem. And we all know in this room, what we do is we work around it. We find ways and different talent processes and different systems to work around it. Again, if we start to pay for skills, if we start to reward for skills, if we start to promote for skills, there's a differentiated way. And you're looking at the unique individual and not the job. Again, business leaders see it. They absolutely see that this is something for them to drive agility, to know their people. And they see, and they think this is a critical moment. Business leaders are saying job descriptions aren't defining what my people do. They're also open a lot more for people to walk across boundaries. Obviously, there are some exceptions, but I hope you all see business leaders are seeing there's less silos in the way that people operate. And they're more open for their talent to move across those silos, to learn, to develop, and create their own autonomy. Again, a massive opportunity for us in HR. So, it is a light bulb moment for us. I strongly believe that. And we've got to say to our workforce and our business leaders, what if your people could do their best work by applying their unique skills and capabilities, driving the outcomes that matter? And these three things are important because ultimately I am going to move into what to do about it. And you have to tackle these three things. You have to understand work. You have to democratize work at a task level. Got to do it. You've got to understand the skills and capabilities and talents and potential of your workforce. You have to find the data and the processes to do that. And you have to understand the outcomes, the business strategies, and ultimately what that work is driving from an outcome perspective. And that has to be your goal. Those three things have to come together to become a skills-based org. So in our market-leading research on this, the good news is, and I'm sure everyone in this room is saying this, 90% of organizations are doing something. 90% of organizations are experimenting with using skills in their talent processes in HR. But 10% of organizations are doing it across the whole enterprise or driving significant enterprise value across different talent processes. And those 10% are seeing significant business and workforce impacts. You know, critically on this slide, organizations that are using skills in this manner are able to anticipate change and rapidly change their dynamics, their skills, usage, their talent processes, the way they're moving to new markets. And that's a massive aspect when we think about the future. They're also likely to innovate more, likely to improve maximum efficiency. And I think really interestingly, they're more likely to create a more inclusive environment. And this is a wonderful side effect for skills we've seen over the last few years. The ability to access talent, for example, using skills that you would not necessarily have thought in the past. If anyone's heard of the 110 Initiative, which is a North American initiative to hire 10,000 Black Americans without graduate degrees, multiple organizations sponsored by an ex-CEO of Merck put this group together. And they're accessing talent that doesn't have a degree, doesn't have certifications, doesn't have the idea of this is what I am and who I am, where as organizations traditionally see them. So the way they're having to access this talent is they're having to use skills. They're using skills to understand this talent and, importantly, cross-business unit, cross-organizations, a common use of skills to understand this talent pool and then use that talent pool in their organizations. Huge success so far, and organizations are seeing they can attract, find more diverse talent and then apply them in their organizations using skills in a much more effective way, accessing new talent and creating more of an equitable and diverse environment. It's not just attracting talent for diversity, though. It's also using it. So if you use skills through your organization, you can reward, you can promote, you can compensate, your talent in a much more equitable way. So what does it mean to be a skills-based org? And I would state that these are your guiding principles when you're starting to become a skills-based organization. These are things to look back on as you make decisions and building your strategy. Are we doing these things in our decisions? The first, are we liberating workers from structural constraints? Are we creating autonomy for them? Are we letting them drive their own career development? And how are we making them feel more autonomous? Are we building repeatable capability? I told you that this is an evolution, not a revolution. The idea here is you've got to experiment and learn, experiment and learn. We've heard that from multiple organizations. Cigna were talking about it yesterday. As you build and experiment, you need to build. What I'm experimenting with, can it actually build core capability that's repeatable as I expand? It's very important that whatever you're building, whether you're experimenting with, you're actually driving business and workforce decisions. So whatever I'm experimenting with, am I enabling my business leaders to make different differentiated decisions on their workforce? Am I enabling my workforce to make different decisions on their career, on their talent processes, and how they find the next project or the next experience? And very importantly, the idea of a workforce of one. This is the idea that you're accessing different talent pools and bringing them into your organization fluidly. There was an interesting report that came out last year from Harvard that said that 55% of the workforce is either now or in the very near future going to change their workforce model. So all of us are going to be changing from on-balance sheet to contingent to consulting to gig in a very fluctuating way. I'm sure many of us in this room have done it. What does that mean for us? That means if over half the workforce is going to be changing, if you don't have a workforce of one, you're not going to be able to attract the right talent. You're not going to be able to use that talent, top talent, in your workforce, and you're going to lose it. It's very, very important. How do we know workers want autonomy and transparency? How do we know they're not getting what they want in the current job-based structure? Well, the data is pretty clear and frankly quite startling. First of all, they want to be seen. They want us to treat them uniquely in their skills and potential, very important, and potential. And they want to create fluidity for them so they can develop, learn, apply their skills. I think it's sad, frankly, I'm going to use the word sad, that there's 12% statistic in the middle here. I think we're failing, if that's the truth. I think we're failing. So now more positive, I promise. What do you do? As we think about moving towards a skills-based org, there's definitely an experimental process here, and the experimenting is on the right-hand side of here. You've got to choose a talent process and go after it, and show value with that talent process. But as I said, you have to build as you do it, which is the left-hand side here. First of all, you've got to come up with a business strategy, and business strategy is important. Ultimately, whatever you're building for a workforce as you build to a skills-based org, your business and your workforce must feel it as a seamless exercise. It must feel, I often use with my clients an image of a swan. So a swan is gliding across a lake. It looks beautiful, effortless. It seems so easy and simple. But if you get a camera and go underneath the water, those legs are going like crazy just to make it seem like it's seamless. We're the legs underneath. We as HR professionals are working so hard so their workforce feels like this is wonderful. I get to see my skills, I get to apply them, I can understand the next opportunity I have. This is seamless for me. My business leaders are saying, wow, you're giving me new data on our people. I can understand them in a better way and I can apply them much more rigorously as I change my strategies. Wonderful, seamless. But for us, there's so much work on the left-hand side that has to go into that. First of all, we have to understand our business strategy, and we have to tie the skills-based strategy to that. What is the most important thing for your business leaders? Is it retention? Is it innovation? Is it creating new talent pools? Is it applying your skills and capabilities for driving those new innovations or product lines? Whatever it is, tie it to that, and then build your change strategy with it. You've got to understand your skills framework and common language. And common language seems so simple, yet it's so hard. You heard it with Cigna yesterday. You hear it in every conversation. Do I have competencies, skills, behaviors, attributes, proficiencies. And what I would say, and I always say this is, it depends. And it really does. Research, understand what everyone's doing, for sure. But ultimately, it has to make sense for you, for your organization. It has to make sense for you in your change journey. Do I keep competencies and skills? Maybe. At least map them together. Do I understand how I apply them? Do I keep proficiency levels? Yes. The one thing I will say when you make these decisions is you do have to consider tech. Tech should not drive it, but tech should be a consideration. For example, there's a lot of conversations around, do I need definitions of skills? You might need definitions of skills as you go through a change process. But when you start working with technologies, for example, Workday, they don't have them. So when you apply them, you don't necessarily need the definitions. You might need it in your change journey. But that's a decision for your organization. You've got to understand how that works. But then when it comes to data and tech, you've got to obviously build the right stack. First of all, where is your skills data coming from? And how is that AI enabled and agile? And how is your tech stack using it? And that plays to the right-hand side. When you start to actually build your tech stack and your data, you've got to decide which talent processes you're going to go after first. And obviously, that's going to impact your data sources and then your tech stack. And governance. I think you've heard it for every conversation around skills. This is probably where most organizations fail. They don't put a rigorous governance process across your HR business partners, across your talent COE, across HR, and some business leaders to say, we are consistently going to use the same language, we're going to apply it appropriately, we're going to interact with our workforce so they feel it's seamless, we're going to tell them why they're doing it and what they're going to get out of it, and we're going to launch it in a very, very systematic way. Very, very important. So where to start? Again, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, I'm just getting over, so I'm just going to take a sip. There's no right answer for where to start, but you can see how some organizations, from our research, where they're sort of committed, really moving enterprise-wide, and where they're experimenting. No surprise here. It's very important to swim downstream. I feel like I'm keeping the swan analogy going here, but let's say you're keeping going with the stream of water. It is easier to link skills to learning, for sure. And easier means you're not necessarily impacting your workforce in a way that they might feel intrusive. What I mean intrusive is you're not going after their pay. You're going after their development. And you don't have to revolutionize your whole talent processes when you go after learning. So learning is a great way to get started, and you can see a lot of organizations are starting there. It's similar to hiring. Hiring is also a really good business case, because if you're trying to find new talent and new access to talent, skills is a way to do that, and that's why a lot of organizations are experimenting with it. We are seeing some rewards. A lot of that is in like hot skills, pay for hot skills, out of cycle. Again, a good way to experiment and learn and how you're utilizing skills. Less in rigorous performance management, as you can see in terms of enterprise-wide. But there's no wrong answer. I'll say one thing that's come up since this research, which was the back end of last year, that we've seen in market at the start of this year, is as skills data becomes more rigorous and people believe it a lot more, we're seeing a lot more organizations use workforce planning skills taxonomies. They're starting to use skills much more in terms of how do they plan for their workforce in the future, especially in a market and a downturn, when they realize that they may have to reduce headcount. So where's the proof? And we're seeing more and more of this. Really importantly, this proof is not around HR metrics. This proof is really around how to use your workforce for business needs. And we're seeing more and more of that kind of data come through, which I'm a key component of. And it's not just sort of the idea, it's not high-tech organizations or startups. There are plenty of those. But there's also manufacturing, where they're utilizing talent in a different way. There's education providers that are building a new operating model for work and working. There's healthcare providers that are finding new access to new talent. And this is a really interesting one that came through the pandemic. This is a provider that had a shortage of nurses, which was very much prevalent globally, across their different workforces, shortage of nurses everywhere. So this organization took the effort of detailing out the work of a nurse to the task level and the skills associated with that for that nurse. And then they surveyed and analyzed their workforce, their administrative and other workforce, for those skills. And they found two things. First of all, they found some administrative and other assistants that had recently expired nursing licenses, and they rapidly reskilled them back into nursing. Secondly, they found administrative staff. Well, first of all, they found nursing staff's tasks that were on the edge of administrative. And they found administrative staff that they felt had skills that could take some of those tasks off. And they alleviated the nurses from those tasks, obviously enabling them to do more of the critical skills and development they needed to do for nursing. Great exercise. Added real value to this organization where they really just couldn't rapidly attract nurses. You can't just spin them out of nowhere. It takes a long time to actually get a nurse's certificate and degree, as you know. So, I will state that the light bulb moment for skills is past. If it hasn't gone off in your organization, I'm sorry, it should have. You should be doing something, for sure. And the reason is because the war for talent remains. Work is increasingly more fluid, and we need to use skills to be more fluid in the way we use our talent. Your workforce is demanding it. They're demanding transparency, autonomy. They need it, and jobs aren't a way to do that. They're failing on all these fronts. Skills-based is the future, but it is an evolution, not a revolution. Please start, experiment, learn, test, build as you do it. And most importantly, I really mean this, have fun with it. If you started on a skills-based journey and experimenting with your workforce and your talent and your business leaders, you will know it's actually fun. You feel like you've got different data, you're having different conversations. So please, we all need to be enjoying this process. Okay, that's my speech over and talking at you. I'd love to hear if anyone has specific questions on anything or other around the skills-based conversation. Yes, I see one. I know we have some runners in the room. Someone in the middle of the room.
Hi, I'm from Conagra, and
Nice to meet you.
excuse me. I also have.
You have the cough too, yeah. I didn't give it to you, I promise.
We just finished our what we call our talent harmonization. We took all of our salaried positions and mapped them to a skills taxonomy with behaviors and ratings and things like that. And we just received a request now where our HRBPs want to create career paths. And I'm kind of challenging some of those because of those requests, thinking that it might be eventually throwaway work if we're moving from jobs to more skills-based.
Yeah.
What would you recommend? Because some of the ideas that I had from a career pathing standpoint to not be a ladder type, but more of a lattice, was to maybe do it more from a job family group or do it by groups of skills, kind of more of a competency level, capabilities level.
Right.
But what would you suggest?
Great question.
Because I know change takes time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, just to answer your direct question, I don't think it's throwaway work, honestly. And this is the revolution or evolution. I think you can go too fast sometimes with skills. There's a risk to both from your HR business partners asking it and then your workforce to say, slow down, we want to do something differently. And the reason is skills. They're like, it starts to create a bad taste in the mouth for skills. So I think personally, if I was in your situation, I would say, how can I start to bring skills into the conversation? You may use it the same process. You might have competencies still in the conversation, but how can I? Two ways. First of all, make some decisions on career based on skills, and that can open up to lateral moves. It can if you start to have that conversation. So data. And then secondly, how can I bring in conversations with manager and a worker that start to bring skills into that conversations. What skills are you developing for that move? What do you think you need to develop beyond it? And most importantly, frankly, you can have it as a career conversation, development, skills, and what do I need to learn for those skills. So I would soft roll it, personally, if I was in your situation, and think maybe next year is the way to maybe move a little bit, but learn from the experience around skills. That's what would be my advice. Great question.
So we're just, Mike Newsham from Bear, we're just starting our skills journey, right? So over the course of this year, we'll be putting together our skills taxonomy. And historically, with projects like this, we have a tendency to overthink things and plan too far before really, truly experimenting. From your perspective, what is critical to figure out before you roll out a skills taxonomy? And second, can you just come to work with me on that?
Love that. I'll sign a contract with you outside the room, trust me. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, sorry, what was your name? Mike. Michael Mike, that's easy. I do think you have to at least, you don't have to have all the answers to these 4 things, but these are the 4 things to think about. You've talked about the fact you're doing taxonomy and skills language. You're ultimately, where are you going from a business and work outcome and workforce perspective, case for change, business strategy. You have to have those 2 documents. And I would literally have like a 3-pager on those 3 things and walk around with them. Like literally walk around with them and say, in fact, one client, which Sanjay and I both know, Cargill, we worked with them on it. And we created a video for Julie Durbin at the time, the CLO, for her to use to go around and talk about transforming skills. So there absolutely is different methods for us to move it. You know, it's obviously got to be appropriate for you, but you've got to think about these 4 components. And then it sounds like you've decided on which talent process you're sort of going after, right? Again, just build that out. The data and tech, you need to understand the stack, at least the strategy for the stack that you're going to go after, but it doesn't have to have all the answers. You know, I strongly think sometimes it's good to start no tech. No tech in some examples, just to test it out. You can literally get a business leader with a small workforce and go after it and change the conversation around skills and experiment like that. Again, it's a change journey. So I would definitely think about those 4 things. And yes, I'm very happy to help. I have a whole crew behind me that can help too. But really nice to meet you. Great question, Mike. I have one at the back.
Hi, John from BP. We focus a lot around skills and having skills taxonomies, but the important element from an employee is their experiences at proficiency levels. Do you feel, in the research that you've done, that there has been a over-focus on the skills taxonomy side at a reduction against proficiency level or the ability to be able to put their skill in practical applications?
Yeah.
And you see that in technologies?
It's a really good question, and I did have a client once that I sort of over-rotated that way and did all the work on this left-hand side and built it all out and then just launched, obviously not going to say who this is, launched it, and the workforce was like, I'm not going to fill out that skills profile. Why am I going to do that? I don't understand how it's driving any effectively. There wasn't really a what's in it for me, and I think this is why we've seen a lot of prevalence around the idea of a talent marketplace as one of the key levers to start pulling on the right-hand side from a workforce perspective. If you're asking people to learn and develop utilizing skills for them to be more autonomous and productive, frankly, I strongly believe you've also got to tell them how they're going to use those skills in your organization and how it's going to be different. Skills marketplace is the easiest way to do that. You know, you're going to open up new opportunities, more agile opportunities for them to learn and then apply those skills rapidly in your organization. So I'm a strong proponent. If you're going to experiment and learn, map learning and development to talent marketplace is a way to start, especially from a workforce perspective. It shows the most value, and the what's in it for me is very clear and productive. And also, frankly, the data for productivity comes back pretty rapidly if it's working. So that's in the case for change at the bottom as well for governance. You've got to, what is in it for the workforce? And I'll say one more thing around data. Don't ask your workforce to fill out a skills profile. Do some work for them. Inference some skills. Find ways from your work processes or other sources to create something that they can review and validate don't ask them to start from scratch. It will fail. Great question. I think there's one at the back here. Sorry, and then you.
Hi, Shannon Nab from Regions Bank. We've recently rolled out a new leadership development competency model, and I'm curious, how have you seen leadership competencies, et cetera, layered into a skills framework?
Great. It's a great and complex question. I think we could spend an hour on that. My 2 cents are that we believe there are technical skills, human skills, and potential. That's what makes up a skill. That's, again, our perspective. Human skills have to link to your leadership model. Now, it doesn't necessarily think they are the same thing, but they have to be crisp, easy to interpret. Frankly, your leadership model, if it's done right, could be your human skills. It depends how it's written, but you have to have a strategy for how you're doing that. If the leadership model isn't applicable in multiple situations, is driving your business model, which doesn't have to be because it could be higher level, it could be more sort of philosophically written, you've got to actually map it to that. I strongly believe that. I think I want to be respectful of the agenda. I know there was a couple more questions, but I'm waiting for Sarah to come grab me, lynch me off stage, which she hasn't just yet. So can I take your question? Is that all right?
Keep them from saying, oh, they need 60 skills for their role
Yeah.
versus the top skills they use the majority
Totally.
of the time.
Great question. And you heard Signa talk about it yesterday around the fact that you have to kind of decide that. What am I going to push from an organization perspective, and how many skills? Because you can overwhelm quickly, right? So to the question about the back, I see a lot of organizations start with the human skill conversation. We're going to push 5 human skills across our organization, and we're going to push that as an enterprise-wide solution, as a way to start talking about skills, and we're going to utilize it in performance and other talent processes. It's a great way to start. But then when you start to think about technical skills, you might start with things like digital, for example, which could be pervasive across your whole organization again. What are the top digital skills you want all of your organization to start with? And then it layers down on top of that. You go to business leaders and say, which are the most important for your organization to go forward? Now, there are going to be some skills that come through your learning platforms, and others that are going to be applicable for people to use, but you might not necessarily pushing them. What you're telling your organization with the skills you choose is, this is important for you to drive our business strategy. There may be some skills that are more pertinent for your potential and what you want to do. But I think there's a line. And I've seen a lot of people say it's like 20%, 30%, we're going to drive as an organization, and we're going to let 70% just organically grow. That could be a decision that you make. Great question. Okay, I really think I am at time here at this point. I want to say thank you for the questions and the engagement through this. It's a massively passionate area for us. And if anyone, please, if you've got ideas of things you're doing or experiments you're doing and you want to tell me, I'm all ears. The more data we can have about this, the better. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for the time.